Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Building Renaissance Leaders. I've been talking about and uh, promoting my interpersonal communication leadership course, and that's a 3 month long course. It consists of 12 classes over 3 months, one night a week, 2 hours a night, sometimes longer, and a lot of work in between each of those classes. It's a seminar oriented class, and I limit it to 6 people, and there's a lot of team learning involved in it. And it's about interpersonal communication. And specifically, I'm focusing on something that I've discovered in the last 5 or 6 years of some research I've been doing that I actually was doing back when I was working in the field and as a leader and for billion-dollar companies, and also consulting in that same arena about leadership and organizational culture change. I I was doing something and didn't realize I was doing it, but as I did some research over the last 5 or 6 years about why leadership hasn't improved very much, it became clear to me that when I was helping leaders and they become successful at changing and improving things, what was happening was I was involved in sort of helping them understand the communication tools that they needed to effectively execute their leadership skills. So over the course of this 40 years or so that I was a leader in consulting, there were a set of skills that were pretty consistent that leaders used almost daily, certainly on a weekly basis. And it was a consistent pattern of these skill sets. Things like conflict management and having a difficult discussion like a performance review discussion, or maybe it was inspiring groups of people and getting them excited and motivated about doing something. So there were about 12 skills that over the years I realized leaders had to execute and deliver and to get their employees to perform effectively like they should and accomplish what they needed to accomplish. So that's what I designed this course around. This course isn't to teach you those 12 leadership skills. Probably you've seen them plastered everywhere you can possibly imagine. What I found was what keeps leaders from effectively using those skills was their ability to connect effectively and develop the trust for their employees to believe in them and want to follow them and want to take the instructions and to go out and execute what they needed them to do. Because often things were changing, and you had to adapt and you had to be agile and flexible. And that's going to be more so over the next decade. So that's sort of what this course is about. But during the course, I tell people this isn't something that is just isolated to leadership. When you learn to be an effective communicator, when you learn effective interpersonal communication, you give yourself the ability to connect more effectively with everyone. So it affects your personal life. It affects other environments outside of your leadership role on a regular basis. Maybe that's in your family. Maybe it's at church. Maybe it's with your friends. Or maybe you've moved into a new environment for work and you're having to connect and meet new people. This is where interpersonal communication, if you really understand it, you really get a grasp on it, it makes it so much easier for you to connect. So what I thought I'd do is I thought maybe I'd take one or two or three different environments outside of your work, but maybe also possibly related to work, that leaders tend to find themselves in, that can, if they were effective in communicating effectively in these environments, it could be beneficial for them. It could be beneficial for their work. If they happen to be a coach or a consultant or a mentor, this might be areas like networking, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. To start with is we often find ourselves networking. We keep hearing that, and most people think about that as I need to network in order to find another job, and that's really a sad state we're in today, but it's true. So what I want to do is talk about networking, and I want you to think about it a little differently, and that I want you to think about it in terms of the power of conversation and communicating has when you're networking. And I want you to kind of look at networking when you're out there. Say you go to maybe a professional association. I attended many of those, or you might be sent to a leadership training class, and you're in Las Vegas or Orlando, or a really nice place for 3 or 4 days, and you're learning about something that is related to your leadership. Wherever that is, you normally find yourself with groups of people that you may not be familiar with if this is your first time, or you are familiar with if you attend, say, a professional association weekly. But you want to look at these as not marketing tools. I think sometimes people look at networking as marketing, and I don't see it as marketing. I see it as relationship building. I mean, just getting to know other people, some people I don't know, or getting to know some of those people I know better. And so I would like for you to begin thinking about it that way. And that means that you have to apply some of the communication skills that we're learning in this course I'm teaching. I'm not going to go into them all. I'll touch on a couple, but I'm not going to conduct a class on both of those. But these will be some of the important things. You'll see how they relate to networking. So first of all, networking, if you're thinking about building relationships, then you have to believe that first impressions are important. And we keep hearing that. But it's more than just your appearance. It's more whether you're wearing a suit or whether you're business casual. Maybe you go to a networking situation and a lot of people are in suits and you're in some sort of business casual. Maybe you're wearing a ball cap like I do. I go to these things and I don't wear suits, and a lot of people are in suits because they just came from work. But my work is not about suits, so I don't wear suits, and I'm not going to be wearing suits after 40 years of wearing them. So I go there. So the question is, do I come in a somewhat casual or business casual mode, and other people all dressed in suits? Is my first impression is that I'm not professional. So I have to overcome that. And the way I do that is through interpersonal communication skill sets. Once people get in a conversation with me, they understand my background. They understand and they feel comfortable talking to me most of the time. So that's what you want to do in a networking. This is about building relationships, not marketing yourself. Just get to know people and build relationships. Start connecting. I keep telling you can't get it done until you can connect. In the course, that's true in networking too. You won't get much done if you can't connect and create a connection where you can start building and understanding each other better. I talk about communication in the course as being on a timeline from impersonal to intimate communication. And normally that's associated with the amount of time you know somebody. But there are some things you can do if you're effective at your interpersonal communication skills. There's some things you can do to shorten that timeline from, let's say you're over here on the impersonal side. And what's that sound like? That's where you sit down. Maybe I used to do it when I was having conversations with people, trying to find out a little bit about how they're feeling about their leaders and their work, but I didn't know anybody, so I would come up to a bar, and I would sit at a bar, and there may be somebody sitting next to me, and you start a casual conversation like, yeah, wow, you're watching the ball game, and I see Detroit's not doing as well. Are you a Detroit fan? And so you're talking about football. You're talking about the weather. You're talking about what kind of job do you do. Those are casual introductory kinds of things. But that's not going to get you a relationship built. A relationship built is when you talk about more personal things where you understand why somebody values something or how they feel about something. So a lot of times I found some issues associated with that was you have to start creating a rapport. And you create a rapport, and once you do that, you have a conversation going, and you move from that impersonal conversation to something that might be more personal, like, so how do you feel about your boss? That's not something that normally takes place with an impersonal conversation, because people feel uncomfortable discussing that, and particularly with a stranger. So there are things you have to do to make them feel comfortable with you, and that's the rapport building. So there's that first impression where you break the ice and they realize you're okay to talk to, and that normally has to do with a lot of nonverbal. Are you closer to them? Are you far away from them? Are you someone who appears, your facial features, you're open, you're not like this, you're kind of open, you're talking, you're smiling. All of those nonverbal cues say, this might be a fun person to talk with, even though I don't know them well. And then I often find there's just about no one that I can't have something that I can associate with that we have in common. So you often find things that are in common, and you discover these things. And as you're making these conversations, and you're moving from that impersonal conversation, and you're getting this person to talk a little bit more about some personal things, you're gonna find out you have something in common, and maybe it's leadership and how you feel about leadership and those things, which is what I was trying to get out of people. So it was easy to kind of move into their job and their work and those kinds of things as we progressed on. If I was crunched for time, you begin to use techniques that you realize and you learn, and most people aren't taught these things. For example, reciprocity is something that most people are not taught about communication. But if someone is comfortable with you and you feel comfortable, and you start moving, and they're a little hesitant, but you start moving in the conversation of something along the line of, yeah, things are tough out there today. I really wonder whether I look for another job. And I'm going, brother, I've been there. After 40 years, I had to really there were some situations I had to work through that I couldn't move, but I wanted to move, and I understand that. So, but what was challenging for you? So there's an open-ended question that isn't your everyday. What kind of work do you do? What's challenging about you trying to find, trying to sustain in an organization where you're having difficulty, but you feel like you want to move out, but for some reason you don't have an opportunity to move out yet. How's that? How are you dealing with that? How is that challenging you? What kinds of things are you coping with? You can ask a series of questions, and one question can lead to another question until you have, if in my case, until I had some of the information I was looking for was, that we do have this problem with leaders not connecting with their employees. And that gets down to a question I used to ask during my assessments, which was, if there was one thing you could, if there was one thing you could have your leader do better, what would that be? And that's a very powerful open-ended question, believe it or not, because they have takes first. I've narrowed them down to one thing, but it's open-ended. It could be anything. And most of the time, I would say 80% of the time, and out of the tens of thousands of questions I asked like that over 40 years to a whole bunch of employees all over the world, for that matter, communication came in far more than anything else out there. So then you have to learn to do something called pin down questions, or you begin to probe, or probing kinds of questions. They're still open-ended, and you go, so communications, wow, that's really broad. So what kinds of things, can you give me some examples of kinds of things that your leader wasn't doing that you wish they were doing? I mean, I find that interesting. I wonder what a leader could do. And they would talk about, well, I never see them. I never see my leader. They send all my communication via text message or email. They never come down and visit and just sit down and talk with me. So frequency of interaction would be an interpersonal communication behavior. It's concrete. You could probably go into our organization and watch it when they weren't. If you were a fly on the wall and they couldn't see you, you could watch and see that employee would go a whole week or 2 weeks and never see their leader personally. So that's a frequency that's an actual concrete behavior, and there's so many of those that are associated that you can begin by questioning and learning through. So one of the things you do as you're getting into conversations is you're listening, and active listening, and I talk about active listening as syncing with the person. And you have to kind of do this to get a feel for it, but I can try to explain it. It's kind of like if somebody is in a bad mood and I'm not, we're not synced. We're not in sync with each other. So that person might be in a bad mood, and they may be rambling on with all the negative stuff in the world, and I'm sitting here taking that in, and I'm feeling that anger and everything, and I'm going, I need to move this person's thought process out of the anger mode. How can I do that? Well, reality is there's some neuroscience that says if you talk in a lower voice and you talk slower and a more calming effect. So when you're asking a question, you're just asking a calm and oriented questions, and you seem to be really upset about this guy. So what is it that bothers you most about him or her? And that calm, collective voice starts to move the person off of that all the negative things they're thinking. It's something that's probably it's not probably, it's associated with the left brain, that part of your brain that is protecting you and deals with the fear and anger and all that kind of stuff. And you're trying to get them to stop thinking about that. So this question does that. All of a sudden, the emotion and the frustration they were feeling, the anger they feel, they have to stop that. And they have to think, what makes them, what does make me mad about this guy? Why do I get mad when the guy do that? So that question in itself is a disarming question. It's an open-ended question. It begins to help you regulate that person's thought processes and behaviors to begin to sink closer to yours. Less anger, just more general conversation about the facts and the issues associated with it. So we begin to feel those kinds of things going on. So this is things you learn about active listening and use of questioning and those kinds of things. And then the other thing that probably I would provide some advice to people about is sharing your story, sharing information. So, you would be talking to this person, you might say something like, "Oh man, yeah, I had a boss like that once. And it was terror. I mean, I was constantly mad and frustrated." And you share your story and then sort of what you did to bring that connection about where you got to know the boss better. I couldn't leave, and I wasn't, it was a good job. I didn't want to give up the job. I had to try to figure out what the boss and I had in common. And so what I did is, I made a point to try to meet him outside of work occasionally for whatever excuse I could come up with. And then we would talk about personal things. I found out he was not the same guy at home and church and other places as he was at work. And so anyway, and that's a true story, and there's a real good story about how I got him to begin to turn around and see things differently and approach me and his other subordinates in a different way. So those are things that come about from active listening, but active listening is something you have to learn a lot more about that you probably haven't spent time on. And then this ability to decide and know about how to ask questions and how to ask the right question at the right time. Those are the things so that if you ask a question, if you say something like, I had that problem, this basically is how that reciprocity works. It creates in somebody the desire to say, okay, I want to tell you about my story now. And now all of a sudden, you've quickly moved from that impersonal to the more personal side of the conversation. And so I'm in there, and you feel comfortable with me, and you feel like it's okay to talk to me. And I'm a non-threatening kind of person. It's a very safe environment for you to discuss this. It's a very interesting process as you learn it, and you learn to become very effective at it. It's a miracle almost how much you can calm somebody down and you can get them thinking. You literally can help them sometimes think their way through a difficult situation, and they don't know you from Adam. You just happened to meet them about an hour ago. So and that comes from active listening. It comes from asking the right question and knowing how and when to ask those questions. And it comes also from you being able to have the ability to understand your experiences and share your stories. And that's where that story aspect comes in. It's so powerful in terms of what you can do to engage yourself in a conversation in a networking environment. It's also, you also find often you can get these conversations going by finding things you have in common initially. I do a lot of research before I go. I mean, when I'm telling people, you got an important kind of discussion to have, whether it's with an individual or whether you're going to be in something like a network environment. The more you know about the people that you're dealing with in that environment, the more research you do. For example, if it's a professional networking environment, I'm pretty certain a vast majority of these people might be on LinkedIn. And if I have kind of a listening who's going to be at the network, I can look them up on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has a pretty good profile on just about everybody who tries to put that profile together. At least you can get a pretty good indication of who they are, what school they've attended, the kinds of things that they've doing, even the kinds of posts that they put out there, that you can read their posts a little bit and find out a little bit about it. LinkedIn is a powerful, powerful source for information about people, that if you're going to have a meeting with me, I encourage you to look at my profile. They'll tell you a whole lot about me before you even step into the conversation. And I'm going to be doing the same thing about you. These are things that you can do to enhance your ability to make a connection, have a great conversation, move it off of that impersonal area, get them to feel more comfortable with you as a person, in a personal way, and develop that relationship that senses that you are trustworthy. It also allows the individual to get the sense about your competency in your area. So if you're into a network environment where you're not really competent in it, don't try to bluff your way through it. Simply ask questions that tells the person you're at least interested in understanding. So if I go into a geological engineering group of oil and gas people, and I'm walking in as a consultant changing culture, I don't know a lot about rocks. But if I get into a conversation, I might indicate, how did you get into studying geology? I mean, did you initially have this sense of what rocks and the earth looks like, and what is appealing about that? It's really interesting to me. I like to know why people get engaged in these things. So now all of a sudden, this is my expertise area. I'm searching information about people because I like to know about people. They know that I'm a consultant. That's my role. But they're talking about rocks, and they're telling me why. And actually, I've been in a few of those situations, and I really learned a lot about, what you have to know to drill, and how you find oil and gas, and all of those kinds of things that were very interesting to me. Very interesting to me. And when you appear interested and you don't know anything about it, and you're simply asking questions, but you're asking them in an intelligent way that gets you connected with this person, you have the opportunity now to develop that relationship. So all of this goes back to, you go to networks to build relationships. And they may not yield anything from a marketing perspective, but there are some hidden opportunities often in many of those situations. So we do active listening, we ask questions, we share our stories, we find things we have in common. The other thing that's important, and the last thing I'll say about this is, don't take your computers. Don't take your technology with you. Leave it home. If you're going into a networking session for an hour, turn your phone off. There's nothing more frustrating to be in a good, connecting conversation and somebody goes, wait a minute, I have to take this call, I'll be right back. That's it. It's over. That connection's gone. So don't do that. Be present. Be mindful. Be there for the conversation and the relationship from that standpoint. And that's hard to do because we're being trained more and more. I mean, I see people that go to eat dinner together and they're actually texting each other. as opposed to looking at each other across the table and talking to each other. That always astounds me. So normally when I go out, I'll leave my phone on silent, and I kind of want to know where all my folks are that are important to me, and that they're all okay before I go, so I don't have to be worrying about, is this an emergency call? And then when I take the phone out, it's some sort of marketing text message that was sent to me. And I stopped the conversation to look at, Amazon had a sale on something. It's not a good thing to do. Just the best thing to do is turn off and just turn the volume down, and just you're not going to be interrupted with it. My guess is there's nothing that critical that you can't get to it a little bit later, and so be present, be mindful. So the things I want to tell you about, are the active listening side, how to ask questions and how to use questions, the engage in conversation, how to use questions to stop a conversation. You do that by not using open-ended questions. You want a direct question that's a yes or no answer to it. Somebody might be saying something, and so you can say something like, so my understanding is this is how you feel about that? And they go, yes. And they go, that's really interesting. I appreciate that very much. I need to go over here for just a minute, but it's really nice talking with you. And you shake hands or whatever it is. You have that haptic touch that says, hey, yeah, that's an acceptable, pleasant, touching experience that people associate with good connection. So those are things. Now, the real question and the last thing I'll say to you is this. How do you learn how to do all this? Well, first you have to learn about it. You have to learn a little more about active listening, other than making sure you're paying attention and that you recite back what somebody said so they know that you heard them. It's more than that. Connecting has to do with synchronizing with that other person's being. And there's a lot associated with how you're sensing the other person's body and their feeling that helps that connection come stronger. You can't do that over a telephone call without visual aid to it, without some sort of visual focus. You can't do that through an asynchronous comment or text message, or I can tell you for certain, you can probably prove this scientifically. I think probably some people have even done this research. You don't get the same physical reaction out of me when you send me a hug emoji than when you actually hug me. Okay, so just keep some things in mind here. Technology's great, but we're humans, and we're geared and wired to need that physical, visual, auditory, all the senses working for us, so we really get a clear understanding of that connection between us. The more we have that, the more likely you are to have a better connection. It's what makes coaching and mentoring and counseling and doing the things I'm doing with you right now very difficult, because I have no idea whether you're hearing this, whether it means anything to you, whether there's something you get out of it or not. Hopefully there is. But the way you do this is you got to go practice. Go someplace that you don't know anybody and start conversations. And then when you go home and you think about it, try to journal it out a little bit if you can, but if you're not into journaling, just think about it. Wow, man, I started that conversation. That person didn't get a word in edgewise. I talked and I talked and I talked and I talked. I don't want to do that. I got to be more quiet. How come I did that? What caused me to do that? Well, I wanted them to know how much I really knew before they even knew me. And that's a big problem. A lot of people who are in the consulting world or who are highly educated or highly experienced, you don't have to be highly educated, but you can be highly experienced in something. You just want people to know you're really good at it, And really, the first thing you want to do is just get them to like you first. Then they're going to discover that you know that stuff. But you got to go practice it. You got to go in, screw it up, come back home, think about it, go back out again. And the reason you go to these other places, to restaurants, or bars, or maybe you go to other professional meetings that people don't know you as much or aren't as important to you in terms of potential clients, etc. And you just get to know, have these conversations, and then each time plan it out a little in advance before you go and see if it makes a difference in how you interact with somebody and whether you correct your problems. And then over time, you'll become better and better. And those questions will come to you just like right off the top of your head. They're instinctive. They're instinctive questions. You have a pattern to them. You understand how they work, and you've practiced them, and you see how they work. So when you go into a networking situation, you're a much more comfortable environment. You're also going to find that works for you in just about any other thing. Now, what you get by learning how to deal with all those skill sets I'm talking about to you, where you do run into a difficult discussion, you have to handle it differently than you would just an introductory and getting into a networking. So you're probably not going to run into a difficult discussion initially, hopefully, in a networking scenario, but you could. And if you happen to, you need to handle those a little differently than you do, say, just a casual conversation. So, and sometimes that's just extricating yourself or just getting away from the conversation altogether, and you have to do that in a way that's appropriate for the environment and the network that you're with or whatever. So there are just a few things. Hopefully they're helpful to you. Obviously, if you'd like to, and a lot of this stuff, I'm going to put this on the Building Renaissance Leaders channel and YouTube. I encourage everybody to go there and subscribe, and then get everybody else to subscribe, because there's a lot of other stuff like this on that channel. I just kind of do them as they come to me, and I just happen to think, well, I had an experience, so it made sense to me to come in here and maybe give some insight into what you might do if you were in a similar kind of environment. So I enjoy helping you do those things. You're certainly welcome to ask your questions in the comments if you have specific questions or something like that, or if you want to get on the air with me and just talk for a while. We could do that too. So anyway, hope these are helpful to you. And go out and practice. That's first learn, then practice. And don't be afraid to do that. Do it in a safe environment where you're not affecting your job or your personal life or whatever. Just go out and meet some new people. You might really enjoy it. Have a good day.